I didn't realize a single sentence could rearrange how you see your entire family. But that's exactly what happened at a backyard barbecue on a Sunday afternoon, with the smell of overcooked burgers in the air and everyone pretending we were one big happy unit. My name's Timothy. I'm 27. And until that day, I still thought, stupidly, that if I worked hard enough, kept my head down long enough, and stayed patient enough, things would eventually even out. They never do. They just get clearer. It was one of those family BBQs that looked perfect from the outside. My parents' place has this wide backyard with a worn wooden deck, a grill my dad treats better than most people, and a garage that's basically an extension of his personality. Tools on every wall, boxes stacked to the ceiling, and a long list of projects that never seem to end. My sister, Rachel, was there with her fiancé, sitting comfortably on the patio furniture, laughing, sipping drinks, doing absolutely nothing. That was normal. Rachel never lifted a finger at these things. She didn't have to. I showed up like I always do. On time, empty-handed because my mom had already told me to just come and help out, which is family code for free labor. I parked, grabbed my keys, and before I even reached the back gate, I could already hear my dad's voice carrying across the yard. Loud, confident, in charge. He liked having an audience. Everything was fine at first. Small talk, fake smiles. My mom hovering, making sure Rachel had enough to eat while telling me I looked tired and asking if I was still doing that job. Same job I've been doing for 3 years. Same job that pays my bills. Same job they barely acknowledge unless they need something. At some point, the conversation drifted to weddings. Rachel's wedding, of course. Her venue, her dress, her future. My dad was holding court, telling relatives how proud he was, how she deserved a smooth path after everything. I didn't know what everything meant, since she'd never struggled a day in her life, but no one questioned it. They never do. Then someone, an uncle, I think, joked about how I was the responsible one, how I'd always been the worker. That's when my dad laughed. Not a small laugh. A big one. The kind where he leans back, beer in hand, like he's about to deliver wisdom. He looked straight at me and said, "Well, Timothy's built to struggle so his sister doesn't have to." Everyone chuckled. Not hard. Not nervously. Comfortably. I remember blinking, like my brain needed a second to catch up. I actually smiled at first, because that's what I always do. Then I asked calmly, "Is that a joke?" My dad didn't miss a beat. He pointed his thumb toward the garage, still smiling, and said, "There's work waiting." Something in my chest tightened. Not anger right away. Just this dull, sinking confirmation. Like a quiet voice saying, "See? This is it. This is how they see you." I nodded. That's what I did. I nodded, took my keys out of my pocket, and walked toward the garage while everyone went back to talking about seating arrangements and flower colors. No one followed. No one asked if I was okay. They never do. Inside that garage, surrounded by dusty boxes and half-finished projects, I started replaying moments I'd ignored for years. Being woken up early on weekends to help your father while Rachel slept in. Being told I couldn't afford college help because we had to think about your sister's future. Being expected to loan money, fix cars, move furniture, show up, always show up, while my needs were treated like inconveniences. I told myself I was just being dramatic. I always did. Families joke, right? Parents say things they don't mean. Except my dad didn't sound like he was joking. He sounded proud, like he'd solved some equation where my effort equaled her comfort. As I sorted through boxes, sweat dripping down my back, I could hear laughter outside. Rachel's laugh especially. Light, carefree, untouched. And I realized something that made my hands shake, not with rage, but with clarity. This wasn't a one-time comment. It was a philosophy, one they'd been living by for years. When I finally walked back out, grease on my hands and dirt on my shirt, my dad glanced over and said, "Good. While you're at it, we've got some shelves that need fixing next week. You'll come by, right?" He didn't ask. He never asks. I opened my mouth to answer, and for the first time in my life, I didn't immediately know what to say, because something had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough that I could feel it settling into place, like the first click of a lock turning. I didn't answer my dad right away. That alone felt like a small act of rebellion. Just standing there, silent, while he waited for my automatic, "Yeah, sure." He frowned, like my hesitation was a software glitch he didn't expect. Then my mom jumped in, smoothing it over, saying something like, "We'll talk about it later," which really meant, "Timothy will cave later." I always did. I drove home that evening with my windows down, letting the noise of the road drown out my thoughts, but it didn't work. That sentence kept looping in my head. Built to struggle so your sister doesn't have to. It wasn't just cruel. It was efficient. It explained everything too neatly. And once you see a pattern like that, you can't unsee it. The next few weeks made sure of that. Rachel started calling more. Not to ask how I was, not to check in, but to delegate. Could I help move some things from her apartment? Could I come by and look at her fiancé's car? Could I front a little money for a deposit because it's just temporary? Every request came wrapped in that same tone. Casual, entitled, confident I'd say yes. And every time, my parents backed her up before I even responded. "You know how much pressure she's under," my mom would say. "You're good at this stuff," my dad would add. What they never said was, "Are you okay with this?" Or "Do you have time?" Or "We appreciate you." I started noticing the small things more. Like how my dad would lecture me about saving money while simultaneously bragging about helping Rachel with wedding expenses. Or how my mom would remind me that I was almost 30 and should be more established, then turn around and excuse Rachel's spending because she was starting a new chapter. Every conversation felt tilted, like the floor slanted just enough that I was always sliding downhill. The real pressure point came about a month later, when my dad called me on a Tuesday afternoon and told me to come by that evening. Not asked, told. I already knew what it was about. Rachel and her fiancé were buying a house. A big one. Bigger than anything they could realistically afford on their own. I showed up anyway, because some part of me still hoped I was wrong. They were all seated at the kitchen table when I walked in. Papers spread out. Serious faces. My dad gestured for me to sit like this was a business meeting, which should have been my first clue to leave. "We just need to talk through a few things," he said. Rachel didn't look at me. She was scrolling on her phone. My dad explained it carefully, like he was being reasonable. They needed help with the down payment. Not a gift, of course. Just support. Something to get them started. He said it like it was obvious that I'd be the one to provide it. I asked how much. The number hit me like a physical shove. It was more than I had saved. More than I could comfortably lose. When I hesitated, my mom sighed dramatically and said, "Timothy, this is family." I asked what would happen if I said no. The room went quiet. Rachel finally looked up, annoyed, like I'd broken the script. My dad leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Then we'd have to rethink some things," he said. "What things?" I asked. He glanced at my mom, then back at me. "Well, you're still living in that apartment we helped you find. And you know, we've always assumed you'd be here for us. For the family." There it was. The unspoken contract. My compliance in exchange for belonging. I left without agreeing to anything. That alone felt dangerous. The call started the next day. Subtle guilt at first, then sharper. Rachel accused me of not supporting her future. My mom cried on the phone about how disappointed she was. My dad reminded me of everything he'd done for me, tallying up years of basic parenting like debts I owed interest on. Then came the betrayal. I found out by accident. A letter from the bank showed up at my apartment, addressed to my parents, with a notice about a loan I didn't recognize. My name was on it, as a co-signer. I read it 3 times before it sank in. They hadn't asked me. They hadn't told me. They had used my information I'd trusted them with years ago, to secure part of Rachel's loan. I sat on my couch staring at that letter, my hands numb, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When I confronted them, my dad didn't even deny it. "We knew you'd overthink it," he said. This was easier. Easier. Like my life was a shortcut. Rachel stood there, arms crossed, and said, "You'll be fine. You always are." That was the moment something inside me finally broke. Not explosively. Quietly. Cleanly. The last illusion I had, that they saw me as a person, not a resource, collapsed. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just said, "You had no right." My dad's response chilled me. "We're your parents." Of course we did. I walked out after that, but this time, it wasn't confusion or hurt that followed me. It was resolve. Because they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. And they didn't even realize what they'd just done. That letter, that loan, that casual theft of my trust, that was the breaking point. And while they were celebrating their smooth path forward, I was already starting to think about what came next. I didn't know exactly how it would play out yet. But for the first time in my life, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't built to struggle for them anymore. After I walked out that night, I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car for almost an hour, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed nonstop on the passenger seat. Missed calls, texts, messages that bounced between anger and guilt so fast it was dizzying. I didn't open any of them. I already knew what they said. I'd heard versions of those words my entire life. The thing that surprised me most wasn't how angry I was. It was how tired I felt. Deep tired. The kind that doesn't go away with sleep. The kind that comes from realizing you've been carrying something heavy for years and no one ever planned to help you put it down. The fallout hit fast. Faster than I expected. Within a week, my dad called to tell me the bank had questions. Apparently, my hesitation had made things complicated. He said it like I'd intentionally caused trouble. When I reminded him that I never agreed to co-sign anything, he went quiet for a moment before saying, "Let's not rewrite history." That sentence stuck with me, because rewriting history was exactly what they were doing. I contacted the bank myself. It wasn't dramatic, just careful questions, calm explanations. I learned more in one phone call than my parents ever intended me to know. My name wasn't just casually attached. It was essential. Without me, the loan didn't hold together the way they needed it to. That explained the pressure, the sudden urgency, the entitlement disguised as family concern. When I told my parents I was looking into my options, everything changed. The tone shifted from disappointed to hostile. My mom accused me of threatening Rachel's future. My dad accused me of being selfish. Rachel sent a long message about loyalty and sacrifice, ending it with, "I thought you were stronger than this." That one almost worked. Almost. But something about it felt hollow. Manipulative. Like strength, to them, meant silence. Then came the practical consequences. My dad stopped answering my calls unless it was about the loan. My mom stopped checking in altogether. When I showed up one afternoon to pick up a box of things I'd left in their garage years ago, my dad stood in the doorway and said, "This isn't a good time." I realized, standing there, that access to my own family had always been conditional. As long as I was useful, I belonged. Losing that illusion hurt more than I expected. The stress started to seep into everything. I couldn't sleep. I replayed conversations in my head at night, imagining better responses, firmer boundaries, things I wished I'd said years ago. My work suffered. I missed deadlines. I started dreading my phone. Every unknown number made my chest tighten. I felt like I was bracing for impact all the time. Rock bottom isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's sitting alone in your apartment, surrounded by the life you built on scraps of approval, wondering how much of it was actually yours. There was a week where I barely left my place. I ate poorly. I ignored messages from friends because I didn't know how to explain what was happening without sounding bitter or pathetic. I told myself I was fine, but I wasn't. I felt stripped down to nothing but obligation and resentment. What changed wasn't a single big moment. It was small, almost boring. One morning, I woke up and realized no one had called me in 3 days. No demands, no guilt, no instructions, just silence. And instead of panicking, I felt something close to relief. That scared me at first. Then it intrigued me. I started doing things differently. Not dramatically, just deliberately. I pulled out every document I had, bank statements, old emails, anything tied to my finances. I made a list of what was actually mine and what I'd let them touch over the years. It wasn't pretty. There were lines blurred everywhere. Accounts I'd opened for convenience. Information I'd shared because I trusted them. That trust had cost me more than money. I called a financial advisor recommended by a coworker. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anyone. Sitting in that office, explaining my situation to someone who had no emotional investment in my family, was grounding. He didn't judge me. He didn't minimize it. He just laid out facts and options. For the first time, I felt like I had a map instead of a mess. Around the same time, I started picking up extra work. Freelance projects I'd always turned down because I was too busy helping family. Funny how much time appeared when no one was calling you to move furniture or fix things for free. The work was exhausting, but it was mine. Every dollar felt different when it wasn't already promised to someone else. I also started therapy. That was harder to admit, even to myself. The first few sessions were mostly me venting, recounting moments I'd normalized for years. The therapist didn't interrupt much, just listened, occasionally asked questions that landed uncomfortably close to the truth. like why I equated being needed with being loved, or why I felt guilty for wanting peace. Those questions followed me home. Slowly, something shifted. I stopped answering calls immediately. I stopped explaining myself in long paragraphs. I stopped volunteering information. It felt awkward at first, like learning a new language late in life. But with each small boundary, I felt steadier, more solid. Financially, things improved faster than I expected. Not because I suddenly made a fortune, but because I stopped bleeding resources. I wasn't covering emergencies that weren't mine. I wasn't fixing problems that had nothing to do with me. I started saving intentionally, for myself. That felt radical. Emotionally, the progress was uneven. Some days I felt strong. Other days, I missed them. Even now, writing this, I won't pretend I didn't love my family. I did. That's what made it hurt. That's what made it real. Walking away from people who hurt you isn't clean or heroic. It's messy. It's lonely. It's necessary. Rachel reached out a few times during this period. The messages were shorter, sharper. She wanted updates. She wanted reassurance. She wanted me back in my old role. When I didn't give it, her tone turned cold. At one point, she wrote, "I don't even recognize you anymore." I almost replied, "Neither do I." But I didn't send anything. The real turning point came quietly, late one night, while I was reviewing a contract for a side project. I realized I wasn't anxious. Not about them. Not about money. Not about what came next. For the first time in months, my mind was focused on my own future instead of managing someone else's expectations. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a fall. It was a reset. I wasn't fixed. I wasn't healed. But I was rebuilding. On my terms. Brick by brick. And the more stable I became, the more nervous my family seemed to get. Because when you stop playing your assigned role, it doesn't just change you. It destabilizes the entire system that depended on you staying small. The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of politeness. After months of cold messages, guilt-tripping, and thinly veiled accusations, my dad called me one evening and sounded reasonable. Calm. Almost warm. He asked how I was doing. He said he hoped work was going well. He even said, "We miss you." Like it was a normal thing to say and not a strategic move. That alone told me everything I needed to know. People like my father don't change overnight. They pivot when pressure builds. And something, somewhere, was applying pressure. I didn't confront him. I didn't challenge the tone shift. I matched it. I gave short, polite answers. Non-committal ones. The kind that reveal nothing. When he suggested we all reset and have dinner together soon, I said, "We'll see." That phrase used to drive him crazy. Now it felt powerful. Over the next few weeks, the pattern became clearer. Rachel messaged me more often, but her words were carefully chosen. Less accusation, more nostalgia. She talked about growing up together, about how stressful wedding planning had become, about how much she wished things were simple again. Not once did she apologize. Not once did she acknowledge what they'd done. That wasn't an oversight. It was a tactic. Meanwhile, I kept building quietly. The side projects turned into something steadier. One contract led to another. A client recommended me to someone else. Suddenly, I wasn't scrambling anymore. I wasn't rich, but I was secure. More importantly, I was invisible to them in the ways that mattered. They had no idea how my finances looked now. No idea what I was capable of doing without them. That anonymity became my advantage. Through a coworker, I got connected to a lawyer, not for a dramatic lawsuit or confrontation, just for information. Someone who could explain my position without emotion attached. I laid everything out. The co-signed loan, the use of my personal information, the pressure, the messages, the timeline. He listened carefully, then asked me a question that stopped me cold. "Did you ever give written consent?" I hadn't. That conversation changed how I thought about everything. Not because I suddenly wanted to burn bridges, but because I realized I'd been operating from guilt while they'd been operating from assumption. They assumed I'd never push back. Assumed I'd never look too closely. Assumed I'd always prioritize family harmony over my own security. They were wrong. I didn't act immediately. That part is important. Revenge, real revenge, isn't impulsive. It's patient. It waits until the other side is comfortable again. And they were getting comfortable. Rachel invited me to see the house. The house my name was tied to. She framed it like an olive branch. Like she wanted my blessing. I said I couldn't make it, but wished her well. That response clearly unsettled her. She tried again a week later, this time mentioning how hard things had been financially. How the loan terms were tight. how they were under pressure to keep everything stable. There it was. The crack. My dad followed up with another call, this one more direct. He said the bank was doing routine reviews. He said it would help if I could just reassure them. He said it casually, like asking me to pass the salt. I asked him what would happen if I didn't. There was a pause, just a fraction too long. Well, he said carefully, that would complicate things for everyone. Everyone. Not me. Never me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and started writing things down. Dates, conversations, messages, amounts. Not because I planned to storm in waving evidence, but because I wanted clarity. I wanted control over the narrative they'd been rewriting for years. I also started reconnecting with people they'd quietly pushed out of my life. An aunt who'd always seen through my parents' favoritism. A cousin who distanced himself after a similar family obligation situation years ago. I didn't frame it as gossip. I asked questions. Listened. Patterns emerged. Stories lined up too neatly to be coincidence. Apparently, I wasn't the first one they'd leaned on until the structure buckled. The more I learned, the calmer I became. Anger fades when understanding replaces confusion. What remained wasn't rage, it was resolve. Rachel's wedding date got closer. Stress mounted. Family group chats revived. Suddenly, I was included again. Tagged in messages. Asked for opinions. It was almost impressive how quickly I was reabsorbed once they needed stability. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just expectation. My mom finally reached out directly. Her message was softer than the others. She talked about regret. About wanting peace. About how families shouldn't be divided over money. That last part made me smile. Because money hadn't divided us. Entitlement had. I told her I wanted peace too. I meant it. Just not the kind that required my silence. Behind the scenes, I made preparations. I updated documents. Changed access. Closed loopholes I hadn't even known existed. Every step was quiet. Legal. Methodical. The kind of work no one notices until it's too late to undo. The final piece fell into place when the bank sent another notice. This one wasn't alarming on its own. Routine language. Compliance review. But I recognized the timing. Reviews like that don't happen randomly. They happen when numbers get tight. When risk shifts. That's when I realized the truth. They weren't just asking for reassurance. They were counting on it. Their entire plan assumed my continued cooperation. And I had stopped cooperating months ago. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I let the invitations continue. Let the tension build. Let them believe they were pulling me back into orbit. Because the higher they stacked their expectations, the harder the fall would be. The opportunity was coming. I could feel it. A moment where they'd need me publicly. Where they'd assume compliance in front of others. Where backing out wouldn't just inconvenience them, it would expose them. I wasn't planning to yell. Or shame. Or make a scene. I was planning to step aside at exactly the right moment and let gravity do the rest. The moment arrived on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks before Rachel's wedding. I knew it was coming because my phone rang at 8:12 a.m., and my dad never called that early unless something was wrong. When I answered, his voice had a tight edge to it, controlled but strained, like he was trying not to show his hand. "Timothy," he said, skipping every formality, "we need to talk. Today." I told him I was busy and asked what it was about. He exhaled slowly. The bank. There it was. Apparently, the routine review had turned into a deeper audit. Apparently, someone at the bank had noticed discrepancies. Apparently, they needed confirmation, written confirmation, that I was fully aware of and agreeable to my role in the loan. Not later. Not eventually. Now. He didn't ask me to help. He assumed I would. "We'll come by this afternoon," he said. "Your mother and Rachel too. It's better if we're all on the same page." I agreed. Calmly. Casually. I even suggested a time. That afternoon, they showed up together, like a united front. My parents sat on my couch. Rachel hovered nearby, arms folded, jaw tight. The energy in the room was thick, heavy with expectation. They spoke quickly, overlapping, explaining how stressful everything had become, how close the wedding was, how important stability was right now. They talked for a long time. I let them. When they finally paused, my dad leaned forward and said, "So we just need you to sign the confirmation. After that, everything settles." I looked at him and said, "I won't be signing anything." The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. Rachel scoffed first. "Are you serious right now?" "Yes," I said. My mom's face crumpled. "Timothy, please don't do this." "Not now." Do what? I asked. Refuse to lie? That's when my dad's tone changed. The warmth vanished. The patience evaporated. You're being selfish, he said flatly. After everything we've done for you. I stood up. Not dramatically, just deliberately. I walked to my desk, picked up a folder, and brought it back to the coffee table. I placed it between us and sat back down. I've already spoken to the bank, I said. And to a lawyer. My mom's eyes widened. Rachel stiffened. You used my information without consent, I continued. That loan only exists because you assumed I'd stay quiet. I won't. My dad laughed, sharp and humorless. You think you can just walk away from this? I already have, I said. Rachel's voice cracked. Do you have any idea what you're doing to us? I met her eyes. Do you have any idea what you did to me? That was the first time she didn't have an answer. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The bank froze the loan pending investigation. The house deal collapsed. Deposits were forfeited. The wedding plans unraveled piece by piece as money dried up. Vendors demanded payments that never came. Excuses stopped working. My parents called constantly. When guilt failed, anger took over. When anger failed, desperation followed. They begged. They blamed. They accused me of tearing the family apart. But something unexpected happened too. Other relatives started calling. Quietly. Carefully. Asking questions. Apparently, the story my parents had been telling didn't hold up under scrutiny. Apparently, when pressure hit, the truth leaked out. I didn't need to defend myself. The facts did that for me. Rachel stopped speaking to me altogether. My parents told anyone who would listen that I was ungrateful, cold, heartless. I didn't correct them. People who mattered saw through it. People who didn't never really mattered anyway. Months passed. The investigation concluded. The bank removed my name entirely. No penalties. No obligations. Clean. Final. The lawyer shook my hand and said, "You did the right thing." I believed him. My parents downsized. Quietly. Their authority diminished along with their finances. The family gatherings grew smaller. Quieter. I wasn't invited anymore, and for the first time, that felt like freedom instead of punishment. Rachel's wedding happened eventually. Smaller. Later. I didn't attend. And me? I slept better. I worked harder. I laughed more. I stopped bracing myself for impact. I learned what peace felt like when it didn't require permission. The strangest part is this. I don't hate them. I don't even think about them much anymore. They taught me something valuable, even if they never intended to. I was never built to struggle so someone else could coast. I was built to walk away.